happy to invite up for our Investing Trends in Visual Tech, David Pakman from Venrock. Come on up. Round of applause. Oh, Malik again from True Ventures. And David Aronoff from Flybridge. All right. So, hi guys.
Hello.
David, don't hurt yourself.
If I slide off the chair here.
Yeah, use the mic so they can hear you make fun of yourself.
That's why I held the mic down below.
Okay, so let's jump off really quickly. So all venture funds have different focuses, different goals, and maybe some sectors. But very quickly on a high level for the audience to understand, 2 or 3 sentences at the most. What stage, what are you looking for, what do you love, what excites you right now?
Series A focused, typically investing in New York and the Bay Area, but also a bunch of other places where we find interesting stuff, but we have offices there and in Boston too. Really looking to back extraordinary entrepreneurs very early on who are trying to create something really, really large and enduring, brands and companies that will last for a really long time and make real impact. We have sort of a technology bias too. But I think that this space in general, sort of visual communication in general, still image or moving image, I think of it as sort of dividing into 2 categories. One is sort of medium-sized opportunities, and one is really big opportunities. And we prefer the latter, and maybe we'll talk a little bit today about how you categorize companies in this space, about which of those buckets they fall into.
True is very seed and Series A focused, mostly seed and some Series A. We just raised our fund 4, which got announced today, about 290 million or so.
All right. What's the rough investments on that stage? There you go.
Somewhere between 500 to 2.5.
Okay, and David, Venrock is roughly?
Yes, we used to say $3 to $5 million first check, but the last couple of years it's crept up a little bit.
Okay, so 3 to 5 plus. David?
So it'll sound a lot like what you just heard. Seed and Series A focus, probably split evenly though between the 2. Offices in Boston and New York. Check size in a seed will be $500,000, and then a Series A will be 3 to 5.
Okay. So one of the things I love asking investors, just to start off as a perspective, there's a lot of entrepreneurs and people that want to build companies in the audience or have companies and looking to raise capital. What is, in 1-sentence answers, your favorite personality trait of an entrepreneur that you would invest in, and your hated personality trait? In 1-word answers.
In 1 word or 1 sentence?
One word.
Something to prove, however you put that into 1 word. That would be my favorite. And hate, unlistening.
Okay, good.
So my favorite would be enthusiasm, and my most hated would be enthusiasm. I think it is a very...
You always cause the trouble, though, huh?
No, but it is a very fine line.
So explain the line.
So the line is, enthusiasm is to sway me and take me into the future, and marketing to me, those are 2 different things.
So you don't like marketing enthusiasm, you like passionate, visionary enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. David?
So I'll have something that lies right in the middle too, which is I like confidence. I want to say confidence, and I can't stand arrogance.
Got it.
And so to me, that's right over the edge.
So it's just, the reason I always ask that is it's a perspective in very simple, direct terms for those that are trying to raise capital. And we all have mixtures of personalities. And do you guys mind if I go with Pakman and Aronoff, just so I don't say David and you guys don't know what it is? Is that okay? Okay. So Pakman, we were, it's actually fun saying that.
Feels good to hear it.
So we were trading emails about what was exciting in opportunities in this space. And you mentioned a little bit of the intersection of visual communication and mobile messaging. So tell us about that and how to differentiate from what already exists to what's exciting you, I would assume is a big differentiation.
Yeah, I think the macros are kind of obvious for all of us, but when I sort of think about them, the overwhelming majority of our attention is moving from PC screens and big television screens to mobile devices. Usually opportunity follows attention. So what do we do on those mobile screens? Well, 1/3 of the time we spend communicating through messaging or social media. 1/3 of the time we're spending casual games. And the last 1/3 is divided among everything else. So communication, messaging is one of the two killer apps for mobile, and mobile's the biggest opportunity in technology. So that's why you see a massive amount of activity in the space. I think we're in inning 2 of messaging, not in the 8th or 9th inning, largely because the overwhelming amount of media used to communicate on messaging apps today is text and some images. And those are low fidelity mechanisms for human expression. Images much higher than text, but video will be even more rich and expressive than still images. And we are barely using video as a mechanism for messaging today compared to text. So I sort of feel like the messaging stream is sort of like where email was before HTML. The social streams are super rich, but the messaging streams are a bit primitive right now. So I think there's a lot more to happen around visual communication in messaging. And I guess I'm really talking largely about video-based one-to-one or one-to-few messaging. I think that's probably one of the largest opportunities on the planet for technology investing today, and it has not played out. It's just starting.
You guys agree, disagree over there?
It's hard to know what inning we're in, but we certainly have seen a bunch of players come up to bat, and most of them have whiffed. When you think about you think even in New York, you can think of 2 or 3 of these video messaging apps that were either one-to-many, one-to-one that just didn't quite make it. I share David's enthusiasm though, because I think it extends into the business side of things where, video conferencing as an example of kind of more multi-party, video messaging is a disaster. It's the same thing as it was, 20 years ago, except you're going over IP instead of ISDN lines, and it still doesn't really work. And Skype, as the cheap alternative to it, you can still be, and I know this because I've done it, you can still be typing on your keyboard, looking at another screen when people think you're actually participating in a rich multimedia experience of video conferencing. So I think that there are still lots of opportunities around this. How you overcome the hesitance to try something new when you've had all these failures, I think is an interesting challenge.
So I think the video is, when you go on one-to-one video, is very intent-driven, and that's a longer, if you have an intent, you can have a longer engagement through video communication. But the web as we know it, the mobile as we know it, is essentially a lot of ADD behavior. So and the video doesn't fit into that. That's why you see things like Giphy become popular, is that they're essentially creating the TLDR version of the video for the generation which is too distracted to watch the video. So I think that is a challenge. And I think as the web or the society itself matures and understands and becomes comfortable with the idea of constant, interactions, that's when video becomes interesting. For now, I think just the sheer, the photos are, plenty exciting for people.
So a couple of those interactions that you mentioned on the video interaction, what would be a couple examples of those interactions?
I think the interactions between, when, checking out or having a chat with your kid on FaceTime, that's a one-to-one engagement, and no amount of pictures can replace that, right? So that's very intent-driven, like you're calling somebody for a specific reason, and you just, and I'm saying calling is like such a 20th century. No, when you FaceTime somebody, you want to have an immersive interaction with them.
So that's a good.
One thing though, is I think a lot of people today, most of the video products we've seen are synchronous video experiences, and I think the dominant mobile-based video communication products will be asynchronous or near synchronous. Like you don't have to be there to talk at the same exact moment. That's what makes SMS so brilliant, is that you can, and particularly the presence-based SMSs, the ones where the OTT SMSs, the other person is there when they're there, and they're about to respond, but they don't have to. They could stop and walk away, and you're okay with that. We're just starting to see that in video. I think that's a meaningful distinction that can change the applicability of video on mobile.
So David, riff on a little bit more, because as you think about the asynchronous nature of SMS, in general, people think that it's near real time. Right? There may be some delay if Ohm's in a meeting or on a plane or something like that. In this vision you have for kind of async video messaging, is it a similar thing where it's near real time or pseudo real time, or is it
Yeah,
more?
so there's a couple products that are just getting early traction that I think maybe go to this. So there's one called Glide and there's one called Holorack.
Chatwalla, I think, is another one.
Yeah, they are, let me record a message and it's, in one case, it's automatically sent. There's no like, let me check it out first. Like a text message you can compose and press send. This is real-time streaming essentially, but it doesn't have to be consumed at the moment that someone's recording it. If you're both in the app at the same time, you're kind of seeing it when the person is broadcasting, but then you respond to them. So it's near synchronous, but it's not two-way live, right? I think that's a meaningful distinction for the space. Because again, you could talk 3 or 4 times, hey, nice to see you, yeah, good to see you too, what do you think of this? Okay, I like that too. And then stop, and you can always come back later. You can't really do that in a FaceTime or a Skype chat. You'd have to say, look, I gotta go.
As always, feel free to interrupt, ask each other questions, ask me, et cetera, et cetera. Aronoff, we were emailing, and you said you're excited for wearables and the Internet of Things that have true value added rather than pure novelty effect.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the difference of that, and I love that because we've had wearable cameras today, we've had drones capturing Delphies, the drone selfie, and what's the difference between true value add versus novelty?
I think in my mind, what I'm trying to grapple with is, so what do you do with the video afterward? And so the novelty thing to me is like, look at me, I have a wearable camera. Wow, that's awesome. Look at me, I'm wearing Google Glass. That's fantastic. The question is, for those that are capturing video, when you think about the GoPro standing on the stage there, looking at us right now, it's what do you do with all this damn footage? I just got back from a mountain bike trip with a bunch of buddies. Everyone had a GoPro. We have 200 gig of footage. It was awesome. We all felt great that we were catching each other, doing whatever we were doing. And now no one knows what the hell to do with all the footage. Sure.
And what's great is that one of the reasons we had some of the pieces of this summit is we spent the last couple hours trying to figure out how can we analyze, how can machine vision and image recognition take out the best pieces or take out the pieces of content that could be most monetizable or advertising, et cetera. So the question is, what is that is really what you're saying, and what is the true value versus novelty? Yeah,
we got into a little bit, and there's in one of the panels that'll come on later today, you'll hear from other companies that are focusing on this idea of high-value curation and kind of automated curation. I think it applies to still and moving images.
Mm-hmm. So are those big opportunities or medium opportunities, David?
Well, maybe one way to think about it is I think, I wish I was a photographer in the same league as Evan, but I'm an amateur wannabe and like David, bought a bunch of gear and have, taken courses, but I'm not gifted. But I put myself in sort of the pro-am space in that I spend money, I buy pro tools or near pro tools, and get and sort of geek out. And I feel like that's a minority of total users, mm-hmm. and the dollars for those markets are commensurate with that. They're interesting, but it's hard to see them becoming multi-billion-dollar companies like Nik photo filters or Nik software, mm-hmm. for instance. You get a lot of these brilliant minds doing amazingly cool image stuff, but when geared towards pro or pro-am, hard to see them as venture opportunities. Mm-hmm. Then you get Instagram, right, and Facebook, right, which are photo sharing and truly mass market use of photography or images in some way, and those are unquestionably venture opportunities. So those are the sort of barbells in it. The 2 examples, I think some form of video-based mobile messaging is absolutely a multi-billion-dollar, many billions-dollar opportunity.
So it's really, does it sound like it's really addressable market and explosion of growth?
Yeah, and everyone's a photographer now, right? The stat I keep hearing is that every year we're creating more images in that year than we did through the entire length of history prior, right? So everyone's a photographer, and the voluminous amount of still imagery and video we're creating grows and grows, and so that starts asking these questions about curation, backup, sharing, and mm-hmm. that seems to me where all the bigger opportunities are.
The interesting fact, so you were mentioning Facebook as a photo sharing. In the early days, it wasn't considered a photo sharing. And then when they initiated tagging of photos, it became an exponential growth, and that's now the core. One of the many cores. Another one, Airbnb, realized that without great images, they can't rent places. So they built an assignment network. So what's interesting here is when we talk about what opportunities in visual communication, it might not be that the business of renting apartments is the visual business. But in order for it to succeed, they have to have great images and therefore built a platform to do that. So are there other verticals in business to business or other verticals that you guys see that might be opportunities that can leverage images and or video that is kind of, wow, I didn't even think about that. Tough question, but I mean, any things pop up?
Shutterstock's a $2.6 billion company, right? And who would have thought that licensing professional images would become as widespread? It's not just for wire services and newspapers, right? We all need good-looking images in everything we create, and you can either make them yourself, borrow them freely from the web, or pay somebody for them. Won't the same happen in video? Is Pond 5 the next Shutterstock? I mean, this is the question. If 10% are the quality creators, how do the 90% get access to really, really high quality stuff?
Right. So IEM was talking about that this morning, that they're building a marketplace and partnering with Getty and trying to leverage that content. Om, you were about to...
I think on the imaging side, right, like your Airbnb, we are very surprised, but real estate people have been using both video and photos and immersive interactive experiences. I don't know, since Web 1.0, I mean, all real estate, like you cannot buy an apartment without taking a tour. I mean, that's essentially what, it's supposed to do. So, I would like to have a similar experience around when buying a pair of shoes or, ordering anything for that matter on e-commerce. So, if Amazon wants you to buy $600 Michael Kors bag, I want to know what it looks like, how it feels, like what does the color look like, what's the fidelity. It just, the current way they are selling it is not going to work, right? I mean, all these, like, I was on the Bonnie's website, and you look at it, and it's like, you can't tell if it's like a corner store or Bonnie's, except for the name. It just is not, there is nothing exceptional about the shopping experience on a luxury department store. So,
that's right.
And visuals, whether they're static or, motion, are going to help us decide what that thing looks like. And I think the big opportunity when I think about this is, it's like, so why are we thinking purely in terms of JPEG, which is essentially an older way of capturing photos, and why aren't we thinking about a new format which goes like a video but like a picture, and it's more immersive? Why aren't we inventing new things which are for the world, which has more cameras in more places, which are capturing the data? It's like we think of these visual sensors as capturing video and photos, and all they're doing is capturing data. So if you create like a data environment which is more immersive and visually understandable, that's where the big opportunity sits, right? That's where big, next billion-dollar companies come from, that kind of radical thinking. So I think that's the way we should be thinking about computer vision. I mean, it's like how long has, the photos haven't really changed.
Right.
Like since
Picture's a picture.
Yeah, picture's a picture.
Right.
And, it used to be on a plate and then on paper, and now it's on digital, but it's still the same.
A video's a video, you just see it on a different screen.
Right, so if we are thinking about capturing data and sharing it on the web, we have to think differently about that.
Okay, so to that point, I think that's a great point. David, you have a company that is in the chip business, in the processor business, and that's kind of a piece of this. When that gets exponentially faster, I'm not the scientist on that side, so my ignorance, I'm sorry. Tell us a little bit about that, and if those technologies are exponentially faster and more battery efficient, you'll see a startup talking actually in a little bit about that subject. Is that going to then drive a whole new generation of opportunities?
I don't think you can divorce kind of the platform, the foundational technologies from the solutions.
Okay.
And so as Om's talking about kind of a new format, it's kind of, my head's kind of racing. My mind's racing trying to think about exactly what that could
Well, we've
be.
been through a bunch of different formats that have tried. So there's the Microsoft format and the
no,
JPEG
but it's more
2000.
than this is more
but this
than
is
just
more
a
beyond
codec.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. This is
Yeah.
an exponential kind of format that we can maybe experience and explore inside of content. Is that what you're saying, Owen?
Well, you look at what we have right now. We have just started to explore how to use GPUs, right? Now we are getting more and more GPU power inside our cell phone. So why do we have to think in terms of a static two-dimensional image
Agreed.
when you can have a data streamed to your device and that GPU creates a visually understandable experience from the data which is coming from all the sensors, right? Like in all the environment. So kind of giving like depth perception and all those things. That's what I mean. It's like, I don't know what the codec looks like, what
Sure.
the file formats look like. But the idea is, why aren't we questioning what we have today and trying to figure out what should be for the
Well,
future?
You're starting to see things like this a little bit when you think about, so this is kind of the transformation from physical to virtual in many ways. And so foundational technologies need to get cheaper and faster and smaller, and Moore's Law makes that happen. So
Right.
I love the chip company that I'm involved with. You know, I hope they can sell bucket loads of their chips so I can make lots of money for my investors. But that's not the point. I think it's more when you look at what is going on in academia. And New York actually has a plethora of great research going on in computer vision. It's really fantastic to be here and see it.
Most of them are here.
Yeah, which is awesome, right? But when you think about how this can all change, I think it's around the metadata, and this speaks back to the aspect of curation. I think that there's, I could combat the notion that pictures haven't changed in 50 years. So the format delivered on, for sure, the amount of metadata, there was barely any metadata when it was on a plate. It was just the image. And then when you move to analog film, you might have had a date stamp on it mechanically, right? Now when you think about the amount of metadata that comes along with that video and film, it's not just geolocation. You can tie it together with facial recognition and scene recognition. You can tie it together with calendar data and contact information. There's so much you can draw in from kind of the connected world. How we then take that and have different representations, I think that that's going to be pretty interesting. But that's a lot of researchers here working on that. How that translates into something which is usable. What's the WhatsApp behind that? What's
the business opportunity behind this? Yeah.
What's the engagement opportunity? We can find the business later. How is it going to engage consumers?
I think the opportunity is in, like, one of the primary things as human beings, what we do is we like to acquire things, right? And to acquire things, there needs to be an emotional trigger. And I think commerce, if it's going the way both Bezos and other people talk about, in which it basically is either you'll have retail stores for experiencing or showrooming, and then you have online. So in that environment, you really need a much richer visual experience. Like, I'm not saying just photos and videos, even something more than that. I wish I could come up with that, and I'll go start that company. But I would say that we have to be doing things very differently, especially if we are going to sell things online in like the high-end things, not just, right now it's like the e-commerce is pretty amateur hour. Like you're going into a Gucci store in real life and versus going to Gucci.com, it just is like a whole different, it's like, it doesn't even feel like the same company, right? So, and I think that's what I'm trying to see is that what does the commerce alone presents a big opportunity, right? The immersive mapping, represents a huge opportunity. So we don't know, but I think there are opportunities out there, and I think it seems like too far into the future, but it might actually happen much faster than we realize, because the more visual sensors we put out in the world, more our expectations of what we want change, right? Like when we had the textual internet, we were very text-driven, and we only expected IMs and SMSs. Now we are thinking differently, and the next generation is gonna grow up with, selfies are normal for them, right? For old people, they're just like, what is a selfie? But for the kids who are like 5 years old, they're almost like ready to take a selfie, like without even you having to say anything. They're posing on it. It's like, when did this happen? And I think that is the behavior change we should expect definitely in the next generation of internet users. That's how I think about it.
Absolutely, makes sense. You were just talking earlier, David, about photographing this weekend, and I took great pictures. Did you take video as well?
No, I did not take any video this weekend. No,
But you spent all weekend doing GoPro and,
Yeah.
and video nonstop. Have you looked at it?
Yeah.
You looked at all the content? You sat through hours
I've
of
not
that?
been through 200 gig or 300 gig, but I've looked through a bunch of it. Yeah. And it's incredible, a couple of long plane flights, and it's time consuming. But it's been a blast.
So any question from the audience? I've got a ton more questions, but I'm interactive. Yes.
Yeah, do you remember the first time you saw someone put a Bluetooth headset in their ear, a wireless Bluetooth headset in the ear, and walk down the street and talk on the phone? You were like, that's insane. Like, no one's ever going to do that.
You remember when somebody told you you were going to get rid of your DSLRs?
You told me that. Look, I mean, the social comfort around what is acceptable around technology is something I never bet against that. Like, I'm always comfortable that the norms will change if it's something that's part of natural human expression or human desire or part of the human condition, and communication is native to us. So I'm not concerned that people would feel weird looking at a phone and talking. Like, doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I won't either. What questions do you guys have for each other?
So I actually had a question for Om. So was Storyhouse, is that the company? Storehouse. And so another, and there's another company here called Keepy that are thinking about kind of digital memories. And so I think that the transformation from what our parents had, which were kind of a few usually crappy photos, but kept forever, kind of it was priceless because of the importance of what was done. Now we've got a world where there's a overabundance of photos, as David was quoting the sheer numbers in terms of the increase. Quality is fantastic, but the importance is super, super low. So as you think about trying to tell stories, how do you curate this stuff in a way that doesn't require such aspirations on behalf of a large audience to actually want to take part in doing it? Because it always strikes me that if you ask anyone, do you want to put together the memories of a birthday party, a wedding, a bar mitzvah, do this, catalog it for your kids, 100% of people are going to say yes. And then 20% or fewer of them are actually going to do something about it.
The more interesting, so there's a couple of things you asked there. One is something which is like, I think about what will the next generation feel like? Will they have the sense of nostalgia, or is it an emotion we will just lose because the whole life we have is stored on a drive somewhere? So what kind of nostalgia are we going to have? Probably nothing, right? I mean, think about it this way, that any kid who's going to grow up to be 21 in 2040 will have access to last 50 years of the world history on a disk drive. That's it. Like, so they don't even have to have any nostalgia. It's just an archive. It's not like, so I often think about that. But at the same time, I have a friend who took pictures and a small video of their, they had a baby, and the first, unveiling of the baby to the family, just like the baby's crying, and the mom, like after 8 hours of labor, and it's like, it was 3 photos and a small tiny video, and just say, hey, meet our future. And I was like, wow, that is the best picture story to ever tell. And I said, I know, I'm there, I'm in the hospital, I'm feeling all the energy in the room, I feel the love, and that's what the memory becomes now, right? And that's what I think visual storytelling is. It was not, like, those people are not big photographers, they're not like, they just took pictures with their camera phones and then made this.
So does it, in order for this to become ubiquitous, does it have to become as simple as taking a selfie?
Well, I think people take pictures of everything all the time now. While I was here, I've taken 10 pictures already, right? Like, I'm probably thinking maybe there's going to be a Storehouse story based on what happened in my 3 hours here. So I think it just is, we take all these pictures, we don't know how to actually use them more effectively. And I think the next generation knows how to communicate with the pictures much better than we do. So
You guys are also actually, what's fascinating is you're saying a similar thing in different ways from the GoPro. You know, before you're going biking, you're probably not going to experience it that much. What you capture, you're going to put it on drive. You're not sure how you're going to use it in the future, but it's going to be valuable because it's a part of our memory, which I talked about this morning. Like the more and more we capture, it's not bad, but it's going to be fascinating how it's going to be leveraged at some time in the future. I was wearing a jawbone for a while. It's data porn, but at some point in the future, it might tell me, well, that's why you're not feeling well.
And soon we won't have to make an active decision about when to capture or not, right? Wearables will take care of that.
So none of you guys are wearing wearables. What's going on? Have you tried them?
You just can't see it, Evan.
They're embedded under the skin.
Great answer. Next question. Who's got the next one
for you?
Yes.
So when I started learning about photography for real, I was taught, and it took me some time, to really see light. And once you see light, you can be a painter. You can at least, you understand the basics of painting. You can make pictures. But when you take a picture with your, and by the way, you were the first person to say to me, when I asked you like in 2008, what gear you're using, you said, just my iPhone. But you don't, all the filters and all the post-processing now corrects for whether you saw light nicely or not now. Mm-hmm. Is that good or bad?
I think it's neither good or bad because what's exciting to me is not just the light, and you're absolutely right, seeing light and seeing the context of an image, a moment is the most important. But the actual hardest thing is the framing in the actual moment. And even moving a millimeter to the right or left, you can crop it. But if you miss that other part of the story, and we used to talk years ago about, if you could, most photographs from consumers have one story in a picture. It's one face, or it's the castle, or it's that. Professional photographers frequently have multiple stories without getting too complex in an image. So the idea is if you can have 3 stories, you can have a foreground, a midground, and a background, that with the right light, that's a phenomenal image.
So do light field cameras help fix that if that really does take off? If we have a light array essentially in the iPhone 17?
I think it will help others do that better, yes. Yeah. But the problem is you still have to do it and figure out what you put in focus. And it's going to be the same problem as the GoPro that you were talking about. Until it does it for you, it could probably help empower more people to do that, yes. But I don't think people want another camera, so it has to go in the camera phone as far as the main camera. But I think so the light is critical. And the more people that can take beautiful pictures, we all benefit, because the more people smile, or the more people make money.
And then they smile.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it comes back to the smile, which is why earlier today, one of the phrases that I love is that this event and our ecosystem is about from capture to smile, whether or not it's an image or a video. That's the ecosystem. So,
any questions from the audience?
Yeah, sure. Questions from the audience? Yes, stand up.
I do not think that mobile messaging is winner take all. It's certainly not today, even though traditionally communication networks have been, right? Like fax machines and the telephone network, there was one POTS network, there was one fax machine standard. But I think we're seeing, there's a lot of subtle differences between the 50 messaging apps out there, there's probably more than that, the 50 that we could list. And those subtleties tend to matter to people who spend 30% of their screen time in them. So I think there's geographic reasons for different popularities. There's feature differences. There's demographic reasons, right? So I don't think it's winner take all. But they do have some network effects in that, if one is striking a chord with a particularly large group, it tends to spread nicely. And I think as investors, we look for those, not the ones that can't seem to get an audience.
Another question from the audience, real quickly. There was another hand. Yes.
Coordinating interdisciplines and to really make this kind of come together in a way, at least in my mind, what I want is someone to figure out a way to tell me my most important photos, my most important videos, to stitch them together with all the information and metadata they can get, and then to tell the story. So I don't have, because I will do it for special occasions, but I won't do it consistently enough. And I think that I'm also a 1%er when it comes to actually paying attention to it. So I think for ubiquity to happen, it's got to be something which is really, really simple at the top level and really, really complex at the bottom, coordinating all these different disciplines.
Okay, great. One more question. Steven, you want to ask a question? So the question was, do kids really these days do it from memory or experience? Great question.
Well, that's exactly what I was saying, is the next generation will not have the sense of nostalgia, which is another way of saying they probably do not want to think about this in terms of memory, because they're essentially, today's kids are growing up knowing that they take a picture and it's somewhere on the internet all the time, right? Like, even though, or it's in their camera phone. And I think that is the big shift which is happening, is that our ability to have memories is being augmented by the machine, just like we've let Google augment, how we used to remember things, and now we just say, I'll just Google that. We're gonna augment our memories with the big giant cloud. And I'm not so sure whether I like it or I don't like it. It's, as an old person, I probably don't like it, but the next generation will just assume that's part of their life.
Yes.
I think photographs are being perfected on Instagram, but in other networks they're still pretty raw and they're not as polished. And geez, Snapchats. If you look at Snapchats, those pictures are not edited anyway. So sometimes if those pictures came in front of me again, I would hate myself. It's like, why did I do this? So.
So so there's maybe a correlated question that I wonder about, which is in the era of narcissism, what role does nostalgia really have? So I think that we have become an incredibly narcissistic society. When you see selfies are kind of the epitome of it all, and so many of you probably out there have some sort of a box or set of boxes where you keep your memories, and it's the physical memories, and a lot of it, or photo albums from your parents or your grandparents. What Om has me thinking about is, okay, so what's that going to be for my kids?
I don't have kids, so I don't really know.
Damn. I guess I'm going to have to figure out the answer for myself.
It's like you were talking about narcissism, so it's all about me. Right? My personal slogan is all roads lead to Om, so I epitomize that society you talk about. But I don't know. I think what is interesting is, I think as human beings, we are all of a certain age, and we are trying to look into the future and predict behaviors of a generation which is just getting going. That is the generation which is going to have a whole different, ideology and interaction with technology. As I said, we are moving into the world where machines are going to augment our behaviors, and it feels uneasy and uncomfortable at times, but we are almost there. It's not like, it's like too far into the future. So the memories will be augmented, and whether they are too processed and so we will have this, perfect memories. But, will that work? I don't know. I have no answer to that question.
So guys, this has been fantastic. We could go on with it. We have a lot more great content. What I typically ask towards the end, and you guys have heard this before, there's a lot of creative people out there trying to build companies or want to build companies or thinking about building them. And you guys see tons of entrepreneurs all the time. What's the one sentence of advice to inspire them to build a successful company?
Do something that everyone's telling you is impossible to do.
For me, it's just like do something which actually solves a problem.
Great.
Spend time with people who actually will use what it is that you're doing before you build it.
3 great pieces of advice, very simple and direct. Guys, thank you very much. And round of applause, great.